and welcome to Frugal Over 50. I'm Amy and I'm happy to welcome you here today to my brand new YouTube channel where we talk about all things related to frugality, minimalism, and intentional living aimed at the needs of the mature woman. Thank you for joining me here today for today's Wednesday One Take, which I'm calling Capitalism, Frugality, and You. Oh my! Now, this is a subject that I've been thinking about a lot, and in some ways I have to confess right at the outset that I'm not entirely sure how to put my thoughts into words in a clear way. But something that I have discovered as I have been reading personal finance books and listening to personal finance audiobooks, reading personal finance websites, and listening to speakers on YouTube, very few people question the overall circumstances in which we live today, particularly in the United States, but all over the world. Very few people question this. People tend to assume that we live in sort of a benign situation that is just fine, and that if we would only behave in a manner that I have to call virtuous, then we would save money, we would live prosperously, and we would live in whatever way we chose. And the whole crux of many of the personal finance books, websites, YouTube channels, everything has been that the system is set up to help you. Why aren't you making it work? And you know, it's not true. And I may be reading the wrong personal finance books. So if you're reading something that says something different and you'd like to comment and tell me about it, please do, because I would love to see a personal finance book that addresses the world in which we actually live. We live in a world where the United States government is so far in debt that nobody can even imagine how that debt will begin to be paid off. Paying the interest of the debt gets us in more debt. We are insanely in debt. At the same time, our government tells us as consumers that we need to save more money because we're too far in debt, but it does everything possible to encourage large corporations to take as much money from us as possible. And I'm not sure that personal finance manuals that only talk about individual situations are enough for me. And I don't know how to get around that. I can read them, I can listen to them, and I hope to review them and share with you the tips that have helped me personally. But if I can't step back and say, you know what, it's not all just me, and it's not all just you. We are in a sewer of debt. Our country is run by debt if you live in the United States. Everything runs on debt. If anybody decided to call in any of the loans, it would be the apocalypse. It would be so terrible that we can't imagine it. And I don't know how to reconcile that fact with the fact that we are constantly told that if only we as individuals would be more saving and more conservative in our spending and more frugal, then everything would be fine. I do think the individual has a role to play. I do believe, and I do experience that if I behave in a frugal manner, that my life improves, my children's lives improve, and there's a ripple effect out into the economy that makes everything better. It also improves our mental health, but there's only so much I can do. I was thinking this morning as I was getting dressed, for instance, I'm wearing a shirt, I'm not going to show you all of it, but it cost me $7. It's something called fast fashion that I've talked about in a previous Wednesday One Take, where the quickest turnaround time on clothes is considered the desirable thing. And the idea when they sold me this shirt was to sell me a shirt that I'd maybe wear once and then throw away, or take to the Goodwill where they could throw it away, because that's what they're going to do with a lot of stuff. And then I'll go back and buy another $7 shirt. It's not okay. It's not okay. I'm going to make this shirt last at least 2 years, even though it cost me $7 and I live in the tropics and I wear it at least twice a week. I'm hoping to make it last 5 years, even though it's made out of tissue paper. But that's just me. That didn't help the small child or desperately poor woman who sewed this seam right here. You know, if we don't think about the huge implications of our actions, then I don't think we're doing it right. On the other hand, we have to not think about it too much or constantly, because I wouldn't sleep at night. I do need to eat, even if my food comes, all of it, from at least 2,000 miles away. I do need to wear clothes, even if that comes from 20,000 miles away. And I don't have any other economically viable options. And this is where I think people who talk about sustainable living have a lot to contribute, because they talk about how to live simply on what you have, on what you can make, on what you can get yourself. But I don't live in a world where that's physically possible for me. And every action that I take has ripple effects. So when I look at being frugal, I am also looking, in some cases, at contributing to the oppression of other people across the world. There's no way around that. There may be, but I haven't found it yet. This is a really tough subject for me to talk about, for me to think about, but it's important to me, and I want somebody to write a book that I can read that acknowledges this fact and that says, your choices have an impact. And I'll tell you, I have seen books and websites and YouTube speakers who talk about how our choices make an impact. And you know what they say? Buy all organic, buy free range, buy all local, buy everything that you can. And you know what? That's the most expensive option. I can't afford it. I would be living in my car if I did all of the things that these folks said. On the other hand, you have the folks who live off-grid, who go back to the land. I happen to personally admire those people because I come from those kind of people, but it's not my reality, and I can't fit that into the life that I live, that I already have 30 years of adulthood going into. Again, I don't know the answer to this. I do know that most of my channel, 99% of my channel, is going to be about tips that I can share with you, and part of my journey along the way to implement those tips. And those tips will all be about personal finance in my particular little bubble situation. But I want you to know that when I read personal finance books and when I'm sharing with you, I have all this stuff in the back of my mind that's just going through there all of the time. And it's not really a horrible, paralyzing sense of over-responsibility, because that does no good to anyone. That's really not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about acknowledging the fact that there's a limit to what we can expect ourselves to do. And we do need to think about the context in which we live, where debt drives our economy. And if we all just stop having debt, I personally think that would be an amazing thing. But there are too many incentives to stay in debt for many people to hear that message clearly, or if they hear it, to be able to implement it. Now, this is not a, oh, I want to be hopeless kind of a situation at all. That's not how I feel. It's not how I live my daily life. If you met me, I would be smiling as much as I am now, because I truly believe that there is hope for the future, and that our personal choices about frugality do make an impact. But I do think it's essential that we understand the world in which we live. And I think it's important that we understand that while personal finance people may be sort of like, oh, no, you need to be more frugal, you need to be more this or more that. Okay, fine. But the world in which we live rewards people who get into debt. And I don't mean by giving them the freedom from their debt, not at all, but we reward people who have stuff, who have blingy lives, who have lots of fancy things. We reward people who look like they've got it all together. We reward appearances. And that's how we're set up. And quite frankly, our federal government runs on that as well, looking at appearances. I wish that weren't true, but from my perspective, it definitely is. I don't have an answer. I will tell you that I do believe in personal responsibility, however, and I do believe that this brand new channel of mine, which talks about my journey towards frugality, minimalism, and intentional living, is something that you might enjoy. I hope that you do, and if you do, I hope that you'll subscribe. If you actually liked this little rant of mine, click the like, click the notification bell so that you can be notified of future videos. So I do think, just like they used to tell us, think globally and act locally. I do think it's important when it comes to understanding finances, to understanding what's possible for us individually and what is necessary for our country and for our world. I do want us to live frugally, I do want us to live minimally, and I do want us to live, most of all, intentionally. And I hope you'll join me on the journey. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.